Hey everyone, ready to dive into something pretty cool? We're talking English fluency, and it looks like 2025 is bringing some serious game changers to the table.
It's exciting, right?
I know. We've got our hands on some really interesting stuff, like a podcast excerpt all about this new gadget that's supposed to, well, kind of revolutionize language learning.
Ah, yeah, I saw that one.
It just makes you think, doesn't it? Even with all the futuristic tech, we're still searching for that magic solution to make us fluent overnight.
The quest for fluency is timeless, it seems. But what's interesting about the sources you've gathered is that they highlight this cutting-edge tech, but also bring it back to the fundamentals we've always known.
Totally. Okay, so before we get all caught up in the AI hype, let's take a step back. Why does this even matter? Why is fluency such a big deal, especially now?
Well, the source really nails it when it talks about how the world is getting more and more interconnected. And English is kind of like the common thread. Strong English skills are becoming essential, for work, for travel, just for connecting with people from different backgrounds.
It's like it's not just about sounding fancy, it's about opening up a world of possibilities.
Exactly.
All right, so let's talk tech. This 2025 gadget, what makes it so special? What sets it apart from all those other language learning apps we've seen before?
One thing that really caught my eye was the AI-powered voice recognition. The source describes it as incredibly accurate, like it can give you feedback on your pronunciation, your intonation, even your rhythm,
Wow, it's like having a personal coach in your pocket.
pretty much.
But, and maybe this is just me being skeptical, can AI really replace a human tutor? Like, can it understand all the nuances of language and culture?
That's a great point, and honestly, it's something the source doesn't fully address. AI is amazing at catching errors, but
Yeah.
some things still need that human touch. Like cultural references, humor, the way we use language to express emotions.
It's like AI can teach you the rules, but humans teach you how to play the game.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so this gadget also mentions these interactive role play scenarios. What's the deal with those?
From what I gathered, it's like a virtual reality for conversations. You can practice real-life situations like ordering food in a restaurant, asking for directions, even having a job interview, all in a safe virtual environment.
I love that, especially for someone like me who gets, a little shy about speaking English in public. Being able to rehearse those situations beforehand would be a game changer.
It's like a dress rehearsal for real life.
Exactly.
It can help you build that fluency and confidence before you step into those maybe intimidating situations. But, and this is important, the source really stresses that tech is only part of the equation. You've got to actually practice speaking no matter what tools you use.
Okay, so let's get practical. What are some of the most effective conversation practice tips that the source highlights?
One that stood out to me was shadowing. It's basically listening to native speakers and then trying to mimic their pronunciation, their intonation, even their rhythm.
Ah, shadowing. I've heard about that. To be honest, it always sounded a bit intimidating, like it requires a really high level of focus and skill.
It can sound that way, but anyone can do it.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can start with short phrases and gradually work your way up to more complex stuff. The key is to be patient. Don't be afraid to make mistakes and just keep practicing.
That makes me feel better. It's about those small steps, right? Building up over time.
Exactly.
The source also mentions something about body language, like how that's important, even when you're speaking a different language.
Oh, absolutely. Communication's not just about words.
Yeah, that's true.
It's about facial expressions, gestures, posture. Those things can make a big difference in how you come across, even if your English isn't perfect yet.
It's about conveying meaning beyond just the words, right? Like showing that you're engaged, you're listening, you're confident.
Exactly.
Now, this one seems kind of obvious, but the source talks about joining English-speaking communities. Why is that so crucial for improving fluency?
Well, think about it. It's like the best kind of immersion you can get.
Hmm.
You're surrounded by the language, you're having real conversations, you're learning from other people's experiences.
It's like a fast track to fluency because you're constantly putting those skills into practice.
Exactly. Plus, you get to meet people from all walks of life, which is pretty cool in itself.
It's like turning language learning into a social adventure.
I like that.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of fluency, this
Yeah.
new gadget that's shaking things up, and some practical ways to improve our speaking skills.
Yeah.
But I want to touch on something that I think a lot of us struggle with, that fear of making mistakes.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
What does the source say about overcoming that hurdle?
Well, it encourages us to see mistakes as, well, not as failures, but as Opportunities to learn and grow. Every mistake is a chance to figure out what we need to work on.
It's like instead of getting discouraged, we should be using those mistakes as stepping stones.
Exactly.
Now, I know we're just getting started, but we've already covered so much ground. We've explored the why of learning English, peeked into the world of 2025 language learning tech, and even gotten some practical tips for improving our speaking skills.
And we've only just begun. This deep dive is going to take us even deeper into the transformative power of language, how it can shape our identities, help us understand other cultures, and build connections that span the globe.
So stay tuned because things are about to get even more interesting.
It really challenges our assumptions, doesn't it? Like we think numbers are just, universal, but even something as basic as that can be perceived so differently depending on the language you speak.
It's like language isn't just a tool for communication, it shapes our whole way of thinking.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm ready to circle back to that futuristic gadget we were talking about. You mentioned the source dives into the interactive role-play scenarios, and honestly, I'm really curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, this is pretty cool stuff.
So what kind of scenarios are we talking about here? Like, give me some examples.
Well, the source mentions things like navigating a busy market in, say, Morocco, or attending a business meeting in London, or even something as simple as having a conversation with friends at a coffee shop in New York.
Wow, that sounds incredibly immersive, like you're really transported to those environments.
That's the idea.
Hmm.
And the cool thing is it uses AI to personalize the experience. So it tracks your progress, figures out your strengths and weaknesses, and adjusts the difficulty level accordingly.
So it's like having a virtual language partner that's constantly adapting to your needs.
Exactly.
I also remember the source mentioning something about gamified learning. What's that all about?
Well, it seems like they've incorporated game-like elements to make the learning process more engaging.
Ah, okay.
So you can earn points, unlock rewards, even compete with other users on leaderboards.
I can definitely see how that would be motivating, especially for people who are, driven by competition or love that sense of achievement you get from games.
Exactly. But it's worth noting that, gamification isn't for everyone. Some people might find it distracting or prefer a more traditional approach to learning.
That makes sense. It's all about finding what works best for you.
Abs-
Okay, so let's talk about something that I think a lot of language learners struggle with, myself included, motivation. Like, how do you stay motivated when you hit those inevitable plateaus or make mistakes? It can be so discouraging.
The source emphasizes the importance of setting realistic goals, for
Oh,
one,
okay, that makes
and
sense.
then celebrating your progress along the way.
So it's about those small wins, right?
Exactly. Don't focus on becoming perfectly fluent overnight. Break down your learning journey into smaller, more manageable chunks.
It's like instead of climbing a mountain, you're taking it one step at a time.
Exactly. And then reward yourself for each step you take. That way you're constantly reinforcing that sense of progress and achievement.
I love that. It's like, gotta celebrate those little victories along the way. What about mistakes? I know that's a big one for me. I tend to get really down on myself when I mess up.
Well, the source encourages us to reframe our thinking about mistakes.
How?
Instead of seeing them as failures, try to view them as opportunities for growth. Every time you make a mistake, you're basically getting valuable feedback on what you need to work on.
Okay, so it's like turning those slip-ups into learning experiences.
Precisely. And the source suggests some practical ways to do that, like keeping a language learning journal.
Ah, that's a good idea.
You can write down your mistakes, analyze why you made them,
Yeah.
and track your progress over time.
It's like turning those errors into data points.
Exactly. You can also ask for feedback from native speakers or language partners. The more you embrace mistakes as part of the process, the less intimidating they become.
It's about shifting that mindset from fear to curiosity.
Exactly.
Now, I don't want to get too tech heavy, but I am curious to hear more about how this gadget leverages AI for personalized feedback. The source mentioned something about pronunciation analysis.
Yeah, the AI goes beyond just basic pronunciation correction.
Oh, really?
It analyzes your intonation, your rhythm, even your stress patterns, and gives you specific tips on how to sound more natural and fluent.
It's like having a speech therapist in your pocket.
Pretty much.
That's incredible. But I also want to emphasize what you said earlier about technology being just one piece of the puzzle. Real life practice is still crucial, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can't just rely on a gadget to make you fluent.
Yeah.
You need to actually get out there and use the language in real-world situations.
Talk to people, make mistakes, learn from those mistakes.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about motivation, mistakes, and even AI-powered feedback. But I think it's important to acknowledge that learning a new language isn't just about, memorizing grammar rules and vocabulary.
There's so much more than that.
It's about connecting with people, exploring different cultures, broadening your horizons.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it such a rewarding experience.
The source talks about how language is a gateway to understanding different perspectives, ways of life, even different ways of thinking. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
It really is.
So, to wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder. What is it about English that draws you to it? What are you hoping to gain from learning this language?
Are you seeking new career opportunities, deeper connections with people from different cultures, or simply a way to expand your understanding of the world?
Think about what motivates you, what excites you about this journey. Because ultimately, that passion is what will fuel your progress and make this experience truly transformative.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. The whys, the hows, even a glimpse into the future of language learning. But now I want to get down to the nitty-gritty. What are some actual steps our listeners can take, like right now, to start improving their English speaking skills?
Well, one thing the sources really drive home is that there's no magic formula. It's about finding what works for you. Some people thrive in a classroom setting, while others learn best through, say, apps or online courses.
Right. It's like everyone learns differently. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the source even mentions this concept of multiple intelligences, which basically means we all have our strengths when it comes to learning. So it's about experimenting,
Yeah.
trying different methods until you find what clicks.
What really sparks that learning fire?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say I've found what works for me. What's the next step?
Well, the sources are pretty clear about this one setting goals, but not just any goals, SMART goals.
SMART goals. I've heard of those.
Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound.
Right, right.
So instead of saying, I want to be fluent,
Okay.
you might say, I want to be able to comfortably order food in a restaurant by the end of next month.
That makes sense. Breaking it down into smaller, more achievable steps.
Exactly.
And speaking of steps, sometimes it feels like you're taking one step forward and two steps back. You hit a plateau, you make mistakes, and it can be so easy to just get discouraged and give up. How do you deal with those bumps in the road?
Well, the source talks a lot about reframing those setbacks. Like, instead of seeing a mistake as a failure.
You see it as a learning opportunity.
Right. It's a chance to figure out what went wrong and how you can do better next time.
And it's not just about the big mistakes, right? It's about those little slip-ups, too. Those moments where you're like, I should have said it this way.
Exactly. And one thing I found really helpful that the source also mentions is recording yourself speaking English.
Oh, yeah, I've tried that. It can be kind of painful to listen back, but it's so helpful.
Right. Because you can hear yourself the way others hear you. You can pinpoint those areas where you need to improve, whether it's pronunciation, grammar, or even just the flow of your speech.
And you can track your progress over time, which can be really motivating.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked about individual learning strategies, but the sources also emphasize something else that's really important: finding a community.
Ah, yeah.
Connecting with other English learners, whether it's online or in person, can make a huge difference.
Because you're all in it together, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can share tips, encourage each other, and celebrate successes. It makes the journey a lot more fun and rewarding.
It's like turning language learning into a team sport. I love that analogy.
Me too. And I think it's important to remember that learning a new language isn't just about, checking boxes and achieving fluency.
It's about so much more than that.
It's about opening yourself up to new cultures, new perspectives, new ways of thinking.
It's like expanding your world.
Exactly.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about, practical tips, future tech, the importance of community, and most importantly, that sense of adventure and discovery that comes with learning a new language.
And remember, this deep dive is just the starting point.
It's just the beginning of your journey, so keep exploring, keep practicing, keep connecting with the world through the incredible power of language.
And most importantly, have fun along the way.
That's it for our deep dive into English fluency in 2025. Thanks for joining us.